Welcome to InTheVortex.Party, your live virtual hot seat podcast for manifestation masters looking to milk reality for everything it's worth. I'm your host, Nick Bro, and I'm here to help you find out where the law of attraction is going wrong so you can get it right. If you'd like to join in our next live call, register at http://InTheVortex.Party. So welcome everybody to another InTheVortex.Party call. I think this is probably maybe our 10th call. The format for tonight's call is the same as previous weeks. We're going to start talking about a topic. Tonight's topic is self-sabotaging behavior, and we're going to follow that with our general Q&A. For the Q&A, you guys can ask questions about tonight's topic, anything about law of attraction in general, bring up where you might feel like you're stuck. Maybe we can do some digging work. So we'll just kind of see where the energy of the group takes us. Now, before jumping into tonight's topic, I just want to remind you guys that starting next week is the money program, the 5-week money training. If you've signed up and you haven't paid, make sure you click the payment link in the email and pay. You're not officially registered until I've got your payment, and we're over half full. And I'm expecting that to be completely full by the end of the week. So if you haven't signed up and you're interested in the program, sign up. And if you're not sure whether you've paid or not, if you're not in the private group for that, then you haven't paid yet. So if you have any questions about that, just shoot me off an email.
I have a quick question, Nick, about this.
Yeah, go ahead.
What time is the money call? Is that the same as this one then?
Same as this one. It's going to be for 5 weeks, and I'll probably move this call to Wednesday nights.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so self-sabotaging behavior. So before jumping into self-sabotage, let's just make sure we're on the same page in terms of what exactly is self-sabotaging behavior. And it's a simple concept. It just basically means you're getting in your own way of achieving something that you want. So it might be getting in your own way in terms of manifesting something. It might be getting in your own way in terms of achieving something. And it's usually a subconscious behavior. Most of the times when you do have a subconscious or a self-sabotaging pattern, you don't even realize you're doing it. Now, there's two kind of major types of self-sabotaging behavior. The first, of course, is procrastination. Most people don't realize that procrastination is a self-sabotaging behavior. And then the second major form of self-sabotage is by screwing things up. So by making mistakes, messing things up. So some examples of self-sabotage are, not launching your website, right? Holding off on launching your website, coming up with excuses why not to launch it, not reaching out to clients, right? When you know you could be. Overeating, right? Causing fights in relationships, always being late. Chronic sickness can sometimes be self-sabotage, right? Frequent headaches, not taking care of your health, and not speaking up. So these are all different forms of common self-sabotage or forms of self-sabotage I've seen in my clients. Now, all forms of self-sabotage have one thing in common. Anybody know what that might be? All self-sabotaging behavior is rooted in the exact same thing. They all start from the same seed. Anybody want to take a guess?
Fear?
Fear. Bingo. Yeah. Every single self-sabotaging behavior starts with a fear. And the only reason you have that self-sabotaging behavior is because there's a subconscious fear that it's not safe to have that desired outcome. Okay? So can anybody guess what procrastination is? What's the fear that causes procrastination? Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
I'm not good enough.
Yeah, so two things, right? Fear of failure, right? Or fear of not being good enough. Right? So those are the two root emotional sources, right, of procrastination. So anytime you notice yourself procrastinating, ask yourself, why am I procrastinating? Right? What am I afraid of? Right? Next, relationships, right? There's a lot of self-sabotaging in relationships. Usually it's around not feeling safe in a relationship maybe because in a past relationship you were controlled or mistreated. And oftentimes it can also be a fear of being loved, right? It might not feel safe to be loved because you might get hurt, right? If the relationship ends unexpectedly, maybe. Money, right? With money, it's less, sorry, go ahead. No? Okay. With money, it's a little bit less obvious. So for example, for some people, it's not safe to have money. It's not safe to hold on to money, maybe due to a past experience where somebody took their money from them, right? And the best way to explain money fears would probably be through a couple of examples. So one example is a client who came to me because she noticed that every time her business was about to take off and that she would sign a financially lucrative deal, she would do things to screw it up. And these things that she was doing to screw it up were things that she would never do with any of the other clients. And we were doing some digging work, and we weren't really getting anywhere. And at one point she mentioned that her father had passed away at the age of 10 when she was 10 years old. And she said, but you know what, we don't have to go there because I've done lots of counseling, I've dealt with the emotions. You know, I don't think there's any need to talk about that. So I said, okay, well, just explain to me what happened. And when she was 10, she was part of a very wealthy family, and her father was a business person. And the father decided to take all of the family's fortune and invest it into what was supposed to be a sure shot deal. The sure shot deal wasn't sure shot. The deal tanked. The family lost all of their money. The father subsequently developed PTSD and passed away of a heart attack. Now, this girl at the age of 10, her subconscious mind, who again wants to keep us safe, associated the death of her father with money, right? Money and the money situation was the reason that her father had the heart attack, based on her subconscious mind and the viewpoint of a 10-year-old. So from that moment forward, the subconscious mind was creating a self-sabotaging behavior, preventing her from making a lot of money, right? Another example I had with another past client was that she had a successful business, but the money was going out faster than it was coming in. And she couldn't figure out why. And eventually we figured out that she didn't like her husband's spending habits. And for her, it was safer to spend the money than it was to allow her husband to have access to those finances. And again, this was a subconscious pattern she didn't know what she was doing. She didn't realize what was going on. Now, in terms of relationships, and I've used this example often, it usually comes from a past relationship trauma. So for example, I worked with a client who was single she didn't have any relationships last for more than 2 or 3 months since high school. And that was because in high school, she was madly in love with her high school sweetheart. They were going to get married. They were going to have a bunch of kids. And then she found out he was cheating on her, right? For her, that was an emotional trauma. And the subconscious mind, right, not wanting her to experience such a severe trauma, decided that being in love was no longer safe. So every time she was about 2 to 3 months into a relationship and started to develop a deeper connection with somebody, she would start to do self-sabotaging behavior so that the relationship would end. These are all self-sabotaging patterns and self-sabotaging behaviors that we don't realize that are actually there. So how do we identify those self-sabotaging patterns? Right? How do we actually realize that they're there? Right? Well, of course, it's through the same digging questions I probably mentioned most weeks. And it's by asking your question, if I had that desire, if I had that thing I want, what's the worst thing that could happen? Right? So right now, think of something you really want. Maybe a relationship, maybe a bunch of money, right? So think of your biggest desire and ask yourself, if I had that tomorrow, if that showed up tomorrow, how would that feel unsafe? What's the worst thing that could happen? Anything come up for you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody feel like sharing? No? Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
For me, it's like basically I'm trying to do videos now, like with my website and stuff like that, trying to market myself in that way. And I've found that it's really challenging for me, and I just keep putting it off. And I think the reason why is because although I love my family, they're really critical. And so my fear is that if I do it and it's not that good, it'll give them even more reason to be critical of me.
So people will judge me.
Exactly.
It won't be good enough. That's super, super common.
Yeah.
We should tap that.
Yeah, we should.
So make a note of that, and next time we connect.
Okay. Yeah, that clicked right now. So
Good. Anybody else?
Me, it's the fear of losing.
The fear of losing. So the
Getting, like, if I get the money, then
fear of losing.
I'm going to lose it. If I get the business, I'm going to lose it because I lost a lot.
Yeah, and that's a very common fear, especially with money. So with money, it's often things like, I won't spend it properly. I'll screw it up. I'll waste it all. I'll lose it. Right. So so that's a good one. Thanks, Eden.
And I did all of that.
Yeah.
Plus, with business, I lost business also.
Yeah.
So now I want to create a new one, but I'm afraid. So I'm procrastinate because I find all kind of reasons that are not right.
Absolutely.
Just not to do it.
Yeah. No, and that makes perfect sense. And you can see that programming is there from those past experiences.
Yeah. So I have to tap it.
Tap it, journal it, whatever tools anybody can find. It's clearing it, whatever means it takes.
Okay.
Yeah, good one. Anybody else want to share? We can get one more. Yeah, go ahead, Gabby.
If no one else is sharing, I just thought of a few things, but the one thing, if I just had a relationship right now,
yeah,
I would fear being rejected.
Okay, and it's interesting.
That's happened in the past.
Absolutely. And does that show up in your line of work at all too?
Yes. Yeah.
So do you see the commonality between the two?
Yeah. So that goes back to not being good enough, doesn't it? Again.
Fear of rejection would bring up a feeling of not being good enough. Yeah.
Because I remember you know how sometimes from your childhood, I don't have many memories from my childhood, but there's a few that stick out, like bad things that happened.
Yeah.
And one of them is that I got rejected by this guy who was super cool on a skiing trip. And that I just have a memory. I don't see it anymore, but it's somewhere.
Yeah, and the emotional trigger is probably there. So when you think about that circumstance, does it still bring up a feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would work on clearing that. And by clearing, if rejection is the dominant emotion that you're carrying, and obviously in your line of work where there's auditions, shifting that emotion of fear of rejection would probably have a positive impact on your career circumstance too.
Interesting that then I chose this career as well, where you're constantly being rejected.
Yeah.
I mean, not constantly, but a lot.
Yeah, no surprise at all, right? And if that fear of rejection went away, then you'd be in a much better place vibrationally to win the auditions. Very good. Good share. That was a good find.
Thanks.
All right. Anybody else? Going once, twice? No? Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, I have something.
Okay, hang on a sec. Go ahead. Christy, you go first.
Okay.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I bought a house today.
Awesome. Congrats.
And I've been scared to death of that. And it's the fear of responsibility.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
And is that something you were aware of prior, or did that just kind of clue in tonight?
Clued in today. Yeah, after I did it all.
Cool. Awesome.
It's like scared, excitement. But it's all wrapped around the responsibility of, the financial aspect of that. So
Yeah, so that brings up the fears.
yeah.
So that stuff you're going to want to try tapping out for sure.
Okay.
And then into that, you might find other layers around not good enough as well, tied to responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Another good one. All right.
Yeah, that's what I was to tell. Like, I'm fear of losing, but it's because I'm not good enough. That's my pattern.
Yeah, there's a belief that you're not good enough.
Yeah, and even if people come to me and they say, "Oh, you help me and it's so great what you do," I don't believe them.
Yeah.
It's like too anchor in me.
And you've built a business before, right?
Yeah, 3.
You've built 3 businesses, and all of those businesses were successful at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any reason why, if you could build 3 more businesses that were all successful and then failed, would you do it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I would do it.
Okay. So what would be the worst thing about starting a new business tomorrow?
That it don't work.
Okay. And if it doesn't work, would you be in a worse place than you're at now?
No, because now I'm freezing. I'm frozen. I don't do anything of my day because I'm just circling around.
Yeah. So I would say remind yourself that by taking action tomorrow, you're not going to be you can't end up in a worse place than you're in now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. All right, so let's move on to the Q&A section of the call. As a reminder, you guys can ask questions about tonight's call topic, or anything in general really you guys want to talk about in regards to LOA, maybe where you're stuck or some things you don't understand. If you have a question, use the little hand icon, wave, post in the little chat window, and hopefully I'll notice you. So if anybody wants to start, go ahead and put your hand up and we'll see where the questions take us. Looking. So Gabby, I guess you're good to go.
Sorry, I thought I'd throw my hand up first because something else just clicked to do with what we just talked about.
Yeah.
The rejection and that memory of going back when I was rejected by this kid in school.
Yeah.
He was one of the cool guys in school.
Yeah.
And I always felt like I needed to fit in. I always felt like I never fit in with the cool guys, and I wanted to. And so he was the one I liked, and then I asked him, and then he rejected me, whatever. So even in relationships, the people that I want, the guys often that I really want, the cooler ones, yeah, I don't get. And other ones come to me, I'm like, no, but that's not the person that I want. Yeah. And it's the same in jobs. And actually this week something happened. I auditioned for something. I really loved doing it, and it was so much fun. And I didn't get it. So, I said this before, the jobs that I really want, I'm not always or not often getting. And the other jobs that I don't want, I get. Okay. So. But it's just funny that it's the same in relationships as well as. Yeah, it's funny. So what I would do is I would ask 2 questions. I would ask, how does not getting what I want make me feel? Right? So you could see if there's any emotion there. And then I would also ask, how does getting what I want feel unsafe? Right? Is there a fear or a feeling of unsafety of getting what you want? So did you grow up maybe with a parent or somebody in your life that made you feel guilty often if you got what you want? Or can you remember one specific event in your life where you got what you wanted, but there were strings attached and you felt really guilty for getting it? And if the answer is no, then it might mean just that it's an emotion. No, but maybe what could be connected? Oh, I don't know. What could be connected is that feeling of always wanting something better than what you have, or not being as cool or as good. Because I remember always, speaking of parents, thinking that I always wanted to have different parents. My parents were separated, and yeah. I don't know. And I always felt like I wanted to have better parents.
Well, what comes to mind as well for you is something you mentioned in the past, was that you always believe that you aren't where you need to be to get what you
Ooh, yes.
want, right? So if you believe that you're not where you need to be to get what you want, right? Oh, I'm not part of the cool kids. Oh, my skills aren't good enough for those big roles, right? That could be it as well.
That leads into the question that I wanted to ask later on.
Yeah.
So maybe I should ask it now, because
Sure.
speaking of relationship, right, I wanted to ask you a question. When I read your thing this week, your relationship single no more thing, when I read it for you,
You read the draft of the book. Yeah.
there was one amazing sentence or headline that you had: your soulmate is a match to your soul, and that you don't have to change anything. You just have to become more of a match to who you already are, right? And removing all the layers, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And that really made me think, hang on, because I always, as you just said, I always feel like, okay, I'm not quite ready yet. I'm not in my career where I want to be yet. Thinking of what Abraham always says, and the person that you want to have, you first of all have to be a match to that, right? And I have high expectations. I'm like, oh, but I'm not that yet.
Yeah.
So,
and
but maybe it's not about being that yet. Maybe it's just about, like you said, it should be effortless, about being me.
your inner being lays out a path for you, and we're all on the path that our inner being has laid out for us. And that inner being path, so that path that's laid out, is laid out with the intent that the authentic you walk that path, right? That path is put down by your inner being for you. And if you're busy not being you, if you're busy being somebody you're not, then it's going to be a lot harder to walk down that path. Right? Our only job is to be our authentic self. And the only thing that prevents us from being our authentic self is our insecurities and our fears. Right? So the more we live our truth and the more we live our authentic self, the better we are at walking our path. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. But where does that then come in, what you said earlier, that I'm always feeling like I'm not where I'm supposed to be yet?
So,
or I'm not who I'm supposed to be yet, or I don't know.
You're exactly who you need to be to have exactly what you want.
Where could that thought or feeling come from then?
It could come from an experience where you feel like you're not cool enough to have the boyfriend you want.
Or being criticized a lot when I was little.
Being criticized, being told you need to get to certain places in order to have certain things.
Oh yeah, conditional love. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be a whole whack of things.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
Awesome, thank you. And if anybody's wondering what book Gabby's talking about, it's my new book about relationships that's coming out next month. All right, so more questions? Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
With Gabby, are you saying that her path, or anyone, their path is predetermined, you can't mess it up type thing?
That opens up a whole can of worms, and something discussions I've been having with friends a lot lately. So my belief is that our path is predetermined, but how we choose to experience that path is not. So, for example, I've had experiences that show me beyond a shadow of a doubt that certain circumstances are planned out. So, for example, before I left my marriage or had any intent on leaving my marriage, I was playing around with some astrology stuff, and I did both of my kids' astrology, and they both came up with lack of father figure. And to me, I did not understand how that could be possible unless I was going to die at a young age. Fast forward 5 years, now I see how it all fits into place, right? Over the last 12 to 15 years, ever since I started studying spirituality and psychic readings and all this stuff, everything from shamanism to Reiki to all this stuff. I've always had people every year, every couple of years doing readings for me, all who knew nothing about me, all saying the same thing about publishing books and speaking in front of big crowds and all this stuff. So to me, that's a sign that our path is somewhat laid out, but I think we also have the free will to work in the opposite direction, right? Or to fight that path. So I think a lot of people who are stuck in life are in big situations of resistance where they're pushing against their path and not walking down it and not experiencing certain things that maybe they're meant to experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you question ever or have doubt
About my path?
Sure.
No, absolutely not.
Nothing, no decision, you're cool with everything.
Absolutely. So,
Wow.
because of the experiences I've had, so like my license plate story, right? Has everybody here heard it? Probably not. So
I haven't.
I'll tell it really quick. So a few months after I left my marriage, I was living in a cottage 2 hours away from town. Only got to see my kids for half the week. And even though I knew I had made the right decision in leaving my marriage, I was at an all-time low. And I said, okay, universe, show me a sign, that things are okay and everything's going to work out. A couple of hours later, I had to go into town. I always take the coastal drive to go into town, but my intuition was yelling out, take the highway, take the highway, take the highway. So I decided to listen. I took the highway and I merged. And after I merged, I look up and the license plate on the car in front of me said, trust God.
Mm.
So to me, that experience showed me that if the universe has the ability to create such a fine-grained experience, to have me 2 hours later pull out behind a specific vehicle, then who am I to doubt anything that I experience? And it was at that point that I totally let go. I just completely flowed and allowed my experience to be what it was. And things just kept getting more and more magical. It was a few months later that I met Anik, right? We share the same name, Nick, Anik, both our parents call us Nick. Drive the same vehicle, we both drive Foresters, and even found out eventually that we left our marriages on the same day, right? Wow. So for me, I've had enough experience to show that the universe really does have our back. Our inner being is guiding us, and the biggest block between living that free-flowing life and resistance or the difficult life is not allowing us to walk our path, right? And the only thing that prevents us from walking our path is the lack of trust, right? If you can trust that your contrasting experiences are there for your growth, are there to help you move through them, and are there to bring you to where you want to be, which I believe they always are, you're going to stop resisting them, right? Because your inner being is always guiding you to a better place, right? It just means that sometimes there's speed bumps on the way to that better place. But the first step in getting to that better place is letting go of the resistance. And letting go of the resistance is dealing with the emotions, dealing with the fears, dealing with the subconscious patterns, all of that stuff. Because that's the only stuff that can hold us back. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else, Nick? Is that about it for you? That's good? Awesome. Okay, any more questions? So somebody I see here is asking, how do I get over fear when I failed in the past? Basically, all the fears we have typically come either from past experiences or from programming we pick up as a child by observing other people's behaviors. So knowing the fear is there is sometimes enough to clear it. If that's not enough, journaling, meditation, allowing yourself to feel it, and then, at the other end of that spectrum would be tapping or working with somebody who can help you clear that out. All right, any more hands, any more questions? We've got a quiet bunch tonight. So Michelle is asking, I'd like to ask about fears and feeling versus speaking or thinking. Do you mind if I unmute you, Michelle, so you can explain a little bit better?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. I've found this several times where I'm so much in my head with words and talking and trying to like talk myself out of the fear and into a better feeling. And then I'll like hear an Abraham thing or remember something, and it's trying to remember or learn tricks to I guess be able to find the feeling or embrace it. And I know there's that, going from like general and there's steps to take. I guess because we've talked a little bit, and there's certain things that will just trigger like crazy anxiety attacks. And then I'm like, how did I get here again? And
Yeah,
like,
and
pick myself up and get to.
that's a good point. So what a lot of people don't realize, and anxiety is a good example of that, is oftentimes these subconscious fears are in the subconscious. So the reason if you suffer from anxiety that you can't talk yourself out of anxiety, even though you rationally know that that fear is invalid, is because the fear sits in the subconscious layer. And the conscious mind speaks in language. The subconscious mind speaks in emotions and images. So they both speak two different languages, and that's why they can't communicate, right? So for me, when I deal with somebody or work with somebody who suffers from anxiety, sometimes we look at, tools like neurolinguistic programming, but you can also get at it at the tapping. So a fear deep down is an emotion, and the key to tapping out that emotion is by being in a more relaxed, calm state. So when your mind is spinning, you're in fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, it's much harder to feel your emotions. So what you want to do is try working on that fear, dealing with the fear when you're in a more relaxed state. And then the other thing you want to try doing is getting out ahead of it in the morning. So in the morning time is when our mind has the least amount of momentum going. So what you want to do is get to a positive momentum state, right? Start tapping into feelings of safety and security early in the day. So there's less of a chance for those negative thought patterns to creep up. Does that make sense?
It makes sense in theory, and since we talked before and listening to a lot of this, I've been doing better at trying to get ahead in the morning. Some of the issues I face in the morning is maybe not being able to catch it early enough, or when I start to, there's anxiety there because there's that like, I always think it was like, Murphy's Law or waiting for the shoe to drop, that if I say, okay, I'm going to do this, or trying to think positive, those other thoughts getting in the way, and trying to work around it. And
and it's tougher to do that while those root emotions are still present, right? So if you can find a way to work with somebody that can help clear out the root, the seeds, because it's those root emotions that fuel the mind, right? Because right now what you're trying to do with the exercise is you're trying to kind of overpower it, right? But the root cause is still there. So really, the key thing, the number one piece of advice is find a way to clear the emotions. Does that make sense? I hear some of these. Does that make sense there, Michelle?
yeah, I guess it's just, I've found good tools to use. It's just being able to use them consistently, to get that kind of breakthrough. I do notice that, since starting all this, I do feel better and better. But it's kind of that one step forward, two steps back, two steps forward, one step back, trying to go forward again.
And oftentimes when we start to make progress, it's almost as if like those emotions are like, oh no, you don't get back over here, right?
I just had that the past week, because feeling pretty good for about the past 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
And yesterday, having one of those days where like looking at the clock, numbers lining up, lots of little things that like they say, the universe winking at you.
Yep.
And then just like, especially towards the end of the day, And then today feeling that kind of like backlash of like, oh no, you don't start thinking too positive there.
Yeah. So my advice there is just keep practicing it, right? And the biggest thing you want to make sure you don't do is don't be hard on yourself if you have a bad day, right? So pat, if you go six good days in a row, pat yourself on the back for that, right? And then the next, then you have a bad day, and then go, okay, so let's see if I can do 7 days in a row.
Okay.
So kind of segment it out.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome. Good stuff. All right. Any other questions? Anybody? No, yeah, Gail? Go ahead, Gail. Gail and then Michelle. Oops. Okay, go ahead.
Mine isn't really a question because it's not fully formed yet, but when Christy was speaking earlier about buying a house and the whole fear of responsibility, I had a huge, hit me hard, really hit me hard. One of my kids has made some life choices that are difficult, let's say.
Yeah.
And, that whole bad mom, didn't do a good job, all that stuff comes up frequently for me. And that fear of responsibility, this was a massive responsibility that was supposed to be a joy and turned into something completely different than I ever anticipated. And I've worked with, understanding that it's her path. I've got my path, she's got her path, and you can probably hear it in my voice. I've got all this emotion burbling up around it again. Yeah. And that responsibility piece never clicked for me before.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm asking. I'm just.
Yeah. I mean, it's good that you have the awareness that she has her path. So, as parents, we put a lot of responsibility on ourselves for where our kids are going and what they're up to and where they end up. But we often forget is that they have their own path and they have their own inner guidance, right? And that, as parents, we're still different. We're the parents, but we're not the creators of their reality, right? And as unpleasant as it is to watch loved ones not necessarily be in the best place or the place we wish they were in, it's hard. But it's also part of their path, right? So our kids choose us as parents, for who knows what kind of reason, right? And we probably choose our kids for who knows what kind of reason, right? So a lot of it comes again to trusting that, our kids and their soul's path is exactly where they're at and that they're on their path and that's okay. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just, this just came up, so I just need to sit with this for a while and figure out. I'm just curious what other areas of my life this is affecting.
Yeah, and it's the responsibility aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be good stuff to journal about for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Good. Any more questions? Oh, I see a hand up. Did Michelle Arsenault, did you wave your hand? Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
Well, what Gail just said sort of leads into what I was sort of thinking too it's a different type of scenario, but like I'm ready to make some changes and take some risks. And I feel like I've really reached a high vibration, but then I'm feeling the negativity of those loved ones that are not ready to come with me. or they're, my kids are walking their own path, right?
Yeah.
So, it just feels like a bit of a division of energy. So it feels like, I'm up here and I'm here. But that's, I used to be down there too at one point in life, and that's part of the journey too, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's a little hard for me to think about taking my next leap because I know I'm gonna have to make some choices.
Yeah, and it's like Abraham says is you can't help a poor person by becoming poor, or you can't help a sick person by becoming sick, right? And sometimes our conscious mind says, well, I'm leaving them behind, or I'm abandoning them, or I'm no longer going to be their source of happiness, or they're not going to be happy if I'm not here doing things for them. And that fear might hold us back, but at the same time, moving beyond that might be the best thing that can happen for them, whether we realize it or not. I think a lot of times as parents, we take on the responsibility of making our kids happy. But by doing that, our kids don't learn to be happy for themselves. So my biggest role as a parent is to try to teach my kids, or for me to not get in the way of allowing my kids to learn to tune into their own inner guidance.
It's true. You always help me with this whenever I get stuck here. You always give me some sort of advice and I'm like, yeah, Nick, that's right. And then the next day I'm like, what did Nick say?
and like if something excites you, if there's something that you're passionate about, that means that your inner guidance, your inner being is pulling you in that direction. That's where it wants you to go. And I don't believe that it would be doing that if it wasn't in your best interest.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I can feel that side of it. No problem.
Good. Good.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good. It's interesting that there's a lot of fear coming up for people on that.
Yeah.
This whole topic about subconscious blocks is bringing a lot of stuff to the surface. And when it comes to fears, I would say that I have very little fears anymore. And it's all around trust, right? Trusting in my experience, knowing that I don't believe that anything will come into my experience if it's not something that I'm ready for or that won't bring me to a higher place. Any more questions? Oh, go ahead, Gabby.
Michelle has just reminded me of something that I keep having all the time. Living in London, right? There's a lot of homeless people that I see around all the time. And I try to give them stuff like food and sometimes money. But I always feel really bad and guilty if and they always sit next to supermarkets or somewhere where you're spending money somehow. And I always feel bad, or I always think like I should give more, I should share more. I feel like I shouldn't, like the other day on Valentine's Day, I thought, I'd buy something nice for myself. And then there was this guy outside and I thought, well, he has less than me even. So maybe instead of buying another nice thing for me, even though it's Valentine's Day and I want it to be good for me, to myself, I wanted to buy something for him. But at the same time, I was going this back and forth. But then I was like, but why should I not buy something for me on Valentine's Day? And I always feel I should give them more, and then I give something to one person, and then another one turns up half a block down, and then I'm like, but it doesn't end, and where's my responsibility to kind of?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Let me remind you that from a vibrational standpoint, whether you help somebody or not doesn't matter, because they're either in the energy of the problem or the energy of the solution. If they're in the energy of the solution and you don't help them, then somebody else will, right? Because they're a vibrational match to the solution. If they're a vibrational match to the problem and you try to help them, it's not going to matter because it's not going to help if they're still in the energy of the problem. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So for me, how do I get rid of that guilt of feeling like I should help everyone, or I don't know.
Yeah, so why do you think everybody else's happiness is your responsibility?
I used to think that even more, because I think, well, I don't know, because I have more than feeling guilty for maybe me having more than they have. But then at the same time, as Abraham says, if I'm thinking that way, then I'm thinking that they don't have the ability to help themselves.
That's correct. Yep. You got to remember that everybody is a vibrational match to their experience, and that you're only in control of your own vibration. So from a vibrational standpoint, everybody's on a level playing field.
And maybe that's the experience they're choosing
Absolutely.
at that point.
Absolutely. One way or another, they're choosing that experience. And it could be that that experience was laid out on their path by their inner being, or it could be that they're not tuning in or receiving or following the guidance of their inner being for one reason. But regardless, they're always on their path. Right? You can't not be on your path. You can choose to try to avoid it and not follow it, but you can never be off of your path. Does that make sense? Because your inner being is always trying to bring you the things you want in 40 to 50 different ways. And it never gives up. Make sense?
Yeah.
Good. Go ahead, Caroline.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, it's kind of loud here, so I'll ask quick. Well, I guess based on your experience and how you're kind of more on the leading edge, I'd like to hear how you handle contrast and kind of how you ride that flow. Like when you're having your worst day ever, how do you handle it?
Okay, let me think about that for a second. So for me, I don't perceive days as like good or bad. So like, it's not that I have a worst day ever. So like, my day is what it is, and it's probably because I'm emotionally stable in my day. So it's like I feel good, and these are the experiences that cross my path, right? And I allow those experiences to be those experiences without trying to control them, right? If they're experiences that I don't necessarily want or didn't intend for, then I'll look up, okay, so what emotions do these bring up? And I work on clearing them or doing some intent setting. Or so for me, it's always about, okay, what's going on what are my circumstances? What's going on? How am I attracting them? But at the same time, not letting it impact the way I feel. Does that make sense? Yeah, so to me, it's like, it's our nature to see contrasting experiences as bad things. But for me, I don't think I have that viewpoint anymore. Right? So it's like, okay, well, this is my experience, so how do I flow through it? Or how do I feel as good as I can regardless of that? And how do I shift my vibration so I no longer match it?
It's pretty awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about manifestations, desires, and being unconditional.
Yeah, and trusting.
In the way you feel. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that helps me, or the biggest reason I can operate in that means, is because of my level of trust. Yeah. Was that a good enough answer?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, you mentioned a minute ago with Gail about this concept of choosing you're choosing your children or you're choosing your parents.
Yeah.
And I've heard that before, that we choose our parents. And I was curious about what your belief is about that, given that, it seems like most of us, with our issues as adults tend to, the root of it tends to be from childhood and oftentimes from parents or a parent. So why would we choose parents that ultimately cause us to have issues, into adulthood? So I'm just curious what your belief is about how we choose our parents.
Yeah, I think it's mostly for growth. I think it's so. For example, for me, if my soul path is to teach people about trust, then I would maybe choose a parent when I'm born who might be really controlling or lack trust, right? Or if I want to be, the world's greatest, substance abuse counselor and write best-selling books about substance abuse, then I might want to have a childhood where substance abuse is present in my life.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Something that's interesting, I did an astrology reading with a really well-known astrologer locally, and she pointed out and showed that a lot of the times the people in our lives and our family and our relationships have the same astrology signs. So we have two signs. We have like an ascendant and a descendant, and I'm not a professional astrologer, so don't quote me on that. But we all have two dominant signs, and when I looked at what my dominant signs were, almost everybody in my family had either one of those two signs. And my girlfriend, it's the same thing. Is so many people in her life have the dominant signs that she has. So it's quite interesting. A really good book, and one of my favorite books, is called Journey of Souls by Michael Newton.
Mm-hmm.
And he does in-between life hypnotherapy. So he does hypnotherapy and brings people to the point in a past life just before death, and then gets them to start explaining what's going on as they go through the dying process and afterwards. And it's really interesting. And if anybody ever wants to have anything like that done, Carolyn, who's in the group here, does hypnotherapy work. And I think she does in-between life stuff and past life stuff and some really fun stuff. She's got clients who are channeling and a whole bunch of cool stuff. So if you've been interested in trying hypnotherapy, reach out to Caroline in the Vortex group. A little unexpected plug for Carolyn. But it's a lot of fun. I did a session with her this week, and it was a lot of fun. And in our session, here's a really good concept that came up. So for me, I'm a Leo. The lion's my totem animal. And in my hypnotherapy session with Caroline, a lion came out as one of my guides. And for me, a lot of the work I've been doing on myself and focusing on is something I've talked a lot about on these calls, is getting in the receiving mode, right? And allowing. And when in this hypnotherapy session, when the lion presented itself, I immediately had this vision of the lions. When you watch them on TV and documentaries, they're always laying down in a field, or they're always laying down under a tree, right? They're super lazy. So when you look at the lion energy, it's always laying there just being lazy. And then when an animal runs by and it needs supper, an antelope or something might run by and it might just go grab it and eat it and go back to being lazy again, right? So that's that same lazy, effortless energy from a law of attraction standpoint that we want to be in the receiving mode. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was super cool hypnotherapy experience. Can't wait for my next one.
Hey, Nick, what was the name of the author of the book you recommended? Journey of Souls by whom?
It's called Journey of Souls, and I think the author's Michael Newton. And that was the first book that I read. After reading that book, it completely got rid of any fears of death. So any of the clients that I work with who are suffering from grief, that's the book I recommend to them. I've probably given away 5 to 6 copies of that book over the last few years. All right, we probably have time for one more question. Anybody else have any more questions? Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
You talk. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I unmuted you.
You talked several times about, a lot about subconsciousness of our thoughts. And I thought it was interesting, the stuff when I started listening to the Abraham stuff, and people would say stuff like that, and they'd be like, oh, nothing can be subconscious because if you're not thinking about it, it can't affect you.
Yeah.
We were taught about that, and so I'm kind of curious because I'm kind of in between because I understand both sides of it. So
yeah, my take on that is that the subconscious thoughts may not be impacting our vibration, but they're impacting our behavior.
Okay.
So that's one point. And the other point is, I don't believe emotions are subconscious. Subconscious is an aspect of the mind. I believe what happens with emotions is we hang on to emotions for so long, we don't realize they're there anymore. So the emotion isn't necessarily subconscious. It's still there, it's still active, and it's still present. But because it's been there for 10 years, like the sound of a background air conditioner or dishwasher, you're just not noticing it anymore.
So maybe another term for subconscious would just be like not active or something like that.
It depends on the context. So in the context of emotions, I think it's not active. In the context of the mind, there's two very distinctive aspects, right? There's the conscious thinking, rational mind, and then there's the subconscious emotion, memory bank, image mind. And I think what happens is we associate emotions with the mind, but I don't think emotions and the mind go together. I think emotions are energy that we store in our body rather than thought that's stored in the mind.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you guys a chance. Any last questions? That was a short one. Few more seconds. Gabby, go ahead, Gabby. You can finish us off. You started us off, you can finish us off.
I always have questions.
That's good.
But they keep coming up. No, but following up on what Carol said earlier, what you talked about with Carol, and how you see contrast now and that you don't really see it as that anymore. But does that mean if you're completely in control of your vibration as you are or say you are, and you're always constantly in a good feeling place, does that mean your vibration is so high that you don't then, or if your vibration is so high that you don't attract any contrast anymore? That doesn't happen, right?
No, so just to clarify, I'm not superhuman. So, you know, I am fairly good at controlling my emotional state and not letting contrast impact me. But of course, you know, there's different levels of contrast and some things are harder than others, right? So for me, you know, if I drop a glass and it falls on the ground and breaks, you know, it doesn't bother me. But for somebody else, it might piss them off and make them angry for the next 3 days. So for me, I'm not at a point where I never, ever experience negative emotion. And I'm sure if I went through a traumatic breakup or somebody passed away that, you know, I wouldn't still be up here. So it's something that comes with practice, right? And there's always going to be contrast, right? But just because there's contrast doesn't mean you have to feel negative emotion about it, right? So I would see, so let's say for the month of March, I didn't get any client signups, right? I would consider that contrast, but from an emotional standpoint, I wouldn't let it pull me down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that means just because you're able to control your emotion and always be on or try to be on high vibration, contrast will still always be in your life because it helps in this environment, because it helps us to grow as well, you to grow as well, because otherwise you stop growing, right?
So my belief is that there's two purposes to life, joy and expansion, right? You can't experience either one without contrast, right? You can't know what joy is without experiencing the opposite of joy. And you can't expand without having contrast experiences that want to make you grow and push for more.
So how do you then deal with people around you who are then, for instance, really sad or really just in moments? Because I have that with friends sometimes where I'm trying not to let them pull me down, but then at the same time I'm feeling like, is that the right thing to do?
I know that either choosing that experience, because you can choose to be angry all the time if you want, that's your choice, right? So either they're choosing those emotions or they're in a contrasting situation that eventually will serve them if they allow it.
But like, for instance, like someone has died in their family or is really ill, that's, you know, kind of understandable that they would feel.
Yeah, and it's okay to comfort them and be there for them, but you don't have to let it impact your emotional state. Right? Abraham talks about the difference between, what are the two words, empathy and shoot, I forget the other word, but
Compassion?
compassion. Yeah. So it's about being passionate but not empathetic. I think empathetic means you're tuning into their emotional state, whereas compassionate, you're holding your own emotional state at the same time being compassionate for where they're at.
So you're understanding it, but you're not feeling it. You're not allowing it to. Maybe.
Yeah. Because anytime you're feeling intense sadness or any other emotion, negative emotion, it's because you're not seeing things through the eyes of source.
And also, again, it's the best way to then help them, to uplift them, to to give them something
Absolutely.
good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good.
You can't help somebody be happy by being sad.
Mm.
Make sense?
It does.
All right. So good call for tonight. Thanks for everybody who joined in. Just as a reminder again, next week is the money program. So our next Vortex Party call will probably be the following week on maybe a Wednesday or Thursday night, or the week after. So again, thanks for tuning in. And if you are interested in the money group, make sure you sign up before it gets filled out, probably by the end of this week. Bye for now. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening and much appreciation for everyone who jumped in on the call. If you want to participate in future calls, suggest a call topic, or be notified of our next episode, be sure to subscribe at http://InTheVortex.Party or come hang out in our InTheVortex.Party Facebook group. If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to leave a review or click the share button to share with others.